Hello everyone and welcome back to another chess openings video. In this video we're going to be covering the final part to the how to destroy the Fisher-Sozin attack, and it's going to be a continuation on part 2. So if you haven't already watched part 2, I highly suggest that you go watch that right now because we're going to be continuing right where part 2 left off. Other than that, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you all so much for 100 subscribers. Let's get right into the video. In the previous video, we covered what happened in this position if black plays the move bishop to b7 or even knight to f6 to try to hang on to their pawn advantage. However, in this video, we're going to be covering the last move that black can play to hang on to their pawn advantage,
which is pawn to d5. This may seem as though black has already won the game, as he's up a pawn, has a great center, and is simply on a path to victory. However, in this position, just like the other two, white is completely winning after the move bishop to f4. This is an extremely crucial move, as what it does is it threatens to capture on c8, and after rook takes c8, you play knight to c6, forking the queen and the rook, picking up a material advantage. For example, if black plays a move such as h6, you simply play bishop takes b8, rook takes b8, and knight to c6, and after queen to c7, you take the rook and enjoy a material advantage. However, that's not all. After this, you can even capture on d5 and take it a step further, as after bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, and queen takes d5, you're going to regain the bishop which you sacrificed on d5, as this knight is pinned to the king. Even if they try something like f5, you simply have f3, and the next move, no matter what black does, you simply pick up the knight. So, as you can see, bishop to f4, just like bishop to g5 in the other variation, is a sneaky threat. In this position, black has a couple of options, which are simply ignore bishop to f4 and play something like bishop to e7. And essentially what this does is that it gives black another sneaky plan, which I will cover later. They could play queen to f6. And finally, they can just move the knight back with knight to f6. And we'll be going over all three of these. If they play bishop to e7, first let's go over this. Just like in the other two variations, you play knight to f5. And if they take on f5, so first of all, let's go over why knight to f5 is important. And it's important because it's threatening to capture on g7 and the bishop. So they're forced to capture with e takes f5, after which you simply take on d5. And what this does is that it has a double attack on the f7 pawn with the bishop queen battery, and you're threatening to capture the rook for free. So in this position, black is essentially forced to trade queens, and after bishop takes d5, the threat still looms on the rook. However, if they try to move the rook away with something like a rook to a7, you simply have to move bishop takes b8, and you've regained a piece. And in this position, as you can clearly see, you have not only regained the pawn, but have displaced black's rook significantly. And after the only move for the rook, which is rook to d7, you can even win back the rook after bishop to c6, pinning it to the king. So, as you can see, after bishop takes d5, the correct move is not rook to a7, but rather black is actually forced to play the sneaky move pawn to g5. Please note that if they play anything other than pawn to g5, you can just take the rook next move, as it's a free rook, and you should be able to win the game easily being up a rook. Or sorry, the exchange. So after pawn to g5, you have to play bishop to e5 to just get your bishop out of harm's way and attack this rook. However, they're going to continue chasing your bishop for a while, and after they play f6 and bishop to c7, they're going to play rook to a7, getting their rook out of harm's way and attacking the bishop. However, just like before, you take on b8, and after rook to d7, in this position, you have to be very careful, as you can't actually play bishop to c6. In this position, if you play something like bishop to c6, it's possible. However, it does give black a chance after king to f7. You can't take right away, as they can just retake. And in this position, believe it or not, it's actually possible for black to win the game, as black is attacking both the knight and the bishop. So they will be able to regain the material loss that they have, 2 pieces for a rook. So instead, in this position of playing something like bishop to c6, you simply play the move knight to b6, attacking the rook and the bishop, while simultaneously protecting your own bishop from the rook's attack. After which, they're forced to play something like bishop to c8 to get out of harm's way, a desperate move, and you can just trade on e5 with bishop takes e5 and f takes e5, and just capture the rook, and just like before, be up an entire exchange, after just getting your bishop out of harm's way. So, as you can see, after bishop to f4, the correct move simply is not the one which we just went over, which was the move pawn to h6 and the move bishop to e7. However, there are still a couple of other moves that black can try in this position. The next move that black can try to play to try to hold on is the move queen to f6. And what this does is that it threatens not only the bishop, but if the bishop is ever gone, then it threatens queen captures on f7, which can be a very deadly threat for white. So after queen to f6, you as white play a sneaky sacrifice, knight takes on e6. And what this does is that it protects your bishop while simultaneously having many threats against black, such as knight to c7. So black is forced to take, and no matter what they take with, whether it be the bishop or the pawn, they're essentially losing. Let's see what happens if they take with the pawn after pawn takes e6. Well, after this, believe it or not, you actually sacrifice another piece with bishop takes on d5. And after they grab the bishop, you play queen takes d5, and in this position, white is winning. And the reason that white is winning, even though they sacrifice 2 pieces, is that, first of all, you're threatening to win back the knight, but more importantly, you're attacking the rook. And another reason why white is winning is that if white does actually get the knight, then it is checkmate, as the black king has nowhere to go. And even if they do black with the bishop, you simply gobble up the bishop. For example, let's say black plays some random moves such as pawn to h6, then you take the knight, and after bishop blocks, let's say, actually better than bishop to d6 is bishop to e7. Even if they do block with bishop to e7, you simply double up on the file and you're going to regain both of your pieces. So as you can see in the position that we were just going over, this is a real threat after queen takes d5, and after this, black has 2 responses. Either just moving their rook to safety. Actually, yeah, they have to move their rook to safety to try to protect their rook. But if they do that, just like before, actually different from before, you actually this time take with the queen. And after a move such as rook to e7, trying to be sneaky, trying to get your queen, you simply play queen takes b4. And in this position, believe it or not, white is actually completely winning, as you're not only threatening to take the knight, but you're also threatening to bring in your own knight. And you're about to see what I mean by that. If they play something like knight to c6, trying to make your queen go away, you simply play queen to c4, attacking the knight, attacking the pawn, and having everything perfectly protected. And in this variation, as you can see, so far white already has 3 pawns for an entire piece. But not only that, white is also threatening the knight and a 4th pawn on a6. So after a move such as, let's say, bishop to d7, protecting the knight, you can go after the pawn, or even better, you can play rook to d1. Just developing your rook and having complete control over both of these files. In this variation, as you can see, white is not only up 3 pawns for a piece, which in most cases is winning, but black's rook and bishop on f8 and h8 are simply never coming back into the game. This is because they're stuck but they're blocked by their own pieces, and it's going to take a lot of time for them to come back, whereas white has many ideas, as both he has 2 rooks controlling the e8 and d8, 2 primarily placed pieces, queen and the bishop, and the knight is also coming in to places such as b6 and c5. So as you can see in this variation, after queen to f6, white is completely winning after the sacrifice on e6. So what's the third move that black has, other than just queen to f6 and bishop to e7? Well, instead of those two, the third move that we're going to go over is what happens if knight to f6. Well, in this case, you play the sneaky move queen to f3. And you're about to see what this entails later on. Well, first of all, what this does is that you're threatening to capture on d5, because the pawn on e6 is pinned to the king. So to stop this, black has to play something like bishop to e7, breaking the pin. However, in this case, you still play pawn to c4, just like before. After this, they are forced to take the pawn, as you're still threatening to win a pawn on d5. So they play pawn to b takes c3, after which you play queen takes c3. And now in this position, you're threatening to come in with your knight. So, and furthermore, you're also threatening to capture, and come in with your other knight on c6, forking the queen and the rook. So in this position, black has to do something like castle, after which you play bishop to c7 instead of taking on b8, as in this position, actually, after they castle, if you take on b8, it's actually a drawn position, so don't do that. Instead, you play the sneaky move bishop to c7, attacking the queen, and after they move their queen, no matter where they move their queen, you're actually completely winning. If they play queen to d7, then you just play knight to b6, forking the rook and the queen, and you're just going to win the game after that, as you're going to be up in exchange. So queen to d7 obviously doesn't work, but if they play queen to e8, well, after queen to e8, you still play knight to b6, and after a move such as rook to a7, you capture on b8, winning a piece. If they try to run away with their rook and try to regain the piece with rook to b7, you simply play bishop to a4, a powerful intermezzo move, that attacks the queen, after which, let's say they move their queen back, and after they move their queen back, you simply capture on c8 with the knight, and in this position, you are just up a piece no matter what black does. So for example, if they capture on c8, you can do 2 things. You can either just trade queens and move the bishop back, or you can play the move knight to c6 if you're really daring, as you're not only threatening to capture on e7, but you're also protecting your bishop. So as you can see in this position, after bishop to c7, black is completely winning. So yeah, that's the end of my video of what to do if they play in the Fisher-Sozin attack, pawn to b5, pawn to b4, and capture on e4. And as you can see, I hope you understand by now that no matter what black does in this position, white is just completely winning. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe on my channel and on this video, and leave a comment if you have any questions, just like before. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.